You're tuning in to the J Blast Network. Oh yeah, welcome to the next level. Yo, everybody, you're tuning in to the J Blast Network. And we're back again with another retro discussion. Today we're going to be talking about fighting games, specifically the content in fighting games. Has the content in fighting games gotten less and less over the years? And I'm not talking about characters. I'm talking about the content of the game, what the game offers, different modes, the different options available to you when you are playing these fighting games. Now, the other day I was playing Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, and it's a really good game. I enjoy the fighting, I enjoy the characters in that game, but I had to notice that some content was kind of missing. If you look at the previous iteration of Virtua Fighter 5, the original Virtua Fighter 5 Quest mode, and then the Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown had these special matches. All this has an arcade mode and the customization, but a lot of the customization is gone from Final Showdown and the original Virtua Fighter 5. And I started looking at more fighting games like Street Fighter, like Tekken, and even Guilty Gear. And specifically in Tekken's case, I look back at it and I see it has the story mode, but there's barely any content for the other characters besides the story mode. If you play the arcade mode, you don't even get an ending. It feels like a lot of fighting games are kind of missing out on this. You know, Street Fighter 5 has become a really good game over the past few years, but when they first started, it was really bad. It was lacking so much content. There was no arcade mode. There's only survival. You had like these really quick general stories. It took like 2 years to get an arcade mode. We got a general story, which is hit or miss depending on who you are, and that was it. You know, I just think back to the day where we had a lot of these different modes besides just arcade mode, besides the training, besides just survival. We had stuff like World Tour and Alpha 3. We had stuff like Quest mode and Virtua Fighter 4 and the original Virtua Fighter 5. And we had stuff like Tekken Force and Tekken Bowl and Tekken 7. You have to pay for Tekken Bowl now, which honestly kind of sucks. And there's no other modes besides that. We also had full stories or story endings. Now, Virtua Fighter never had any endings. I really wish they would add some endings. They had one thing in Virtua Fighter 3, but they don't really have any endings once you beat the game. Even if you beat Dural, as hard as hell Dural is, you don't get an ending for it, which is kind of disappointing. It would add a little bit more incentive to play the arcade mode, but besides that, they always made up for it with the other content. I would say fighting games, when I look back on it, fighting games kind of had the same stuff in the 90s, in the early 90s for the 16-bit era, and in the mid-90s for the 32-bit era. A lot of fighting games didn't start getting a bunch more content added until the latter half of the 32-bit era. You had your standard stuff, arcade mode, you unlock characters, and you had some other mode with it, along with trading and stuff. Now a lot of people want the fighting to be great, and I absolutely agree that the fighting is the most important thing, because that's what's going to keep your game alive. You know, your game's going to be alive if you had good fighting in your game. But I also think that if you're charging, full price for these games, I think there should be something else to offer. Now, I'm not saying every game has to have 50 characters or a small roster is bad. That's not the problem. Having a small roster is fine. It's what you do with that roster that makes that roster great. Guilty Gear Strive, for instance, has a very small roster, right? But I think they picked some good choices, even if Jam is missing, which is kind of upsetting. But I think they picked some good choices, and the fighting is great. But when I look at Guilty Gear Strive, I feel the arcade mode is very gimped compared to the previous iterations of the Guilty Gear games. And I wish there was more done to fix that. For instance, in Guilty Gear Strive, you go through the arcade mode and you get like one small in-game cutscene that introduces a problem in the beginning, and then you fight the same final boss, and you get another small cutscene that's like in-game that lasts like 5 seconds, and that's it. No like ending cutscene or anything. And Guilty Gear Strive has a big story mode, but that's not playable, right? And so that's your single player. I mean, you have survival, but that's it. I mean, in the older Guilty Gears, you had mom mode. The arcade mode actually had a story with it. Characters actually had cutscenes and endings. Now, I know the original Guilty Gear X kind of lacked these features. Well, actually it did lack these features. But when you look into development, that was kind of rushed. And even if you look into development of Strive, what's going on in the world right now is understandable, and they're going to add some free modes in the future, right? But I do think that a lot of modern fighting games are lacking a lot of these features that honestly kind of made those games feel very complete. I go back and play Tekken 4 a lot. Tekken 4 is probably my favorite Tekken game. I guess it feels so realistic with the way the environments are and stuff. I love the gameplay, but I also love the story. And I also love playing Tekken Force and the other modes in the game. And that's what keeps me going back. And you know what the thing is? That game has a smaller roster, smaller than Tekken Tag. And that game is missing some important characters like Jack. But you know what? It's fun as hell. And you know what? It has those modes. Tekken Tag also has some modes too. But my point is that I feel as though, you can have you need good online, you need good fighting, but you also need good content, I feel. Especially with people paying for these games. Nowadays, it's much more easier to access online multiplayer. So I feel as though developers don't really feel they get to put that much content in because they want to make multiplayer great, which is very important. They need to make multiplayer great, right? Because if the multiplayer is not great, then your game's probably dead. Now, but at the same time, I also wish that they would put more into making different types of content in the game. One mode of content that could be added is the tournament mode. Hey, it has a good single player, well, even with its issues, is Smash Ultimate. Now, Smash Ultimate has its issues compared to its original when it comes to its content in terms of like the modes you have and what the modes actually offer. Like for instance, the event modes are not as strong, I would say, and World of Light kind of takes over everything for that. But at the same time, you do have a tournament mode. Hey, a tournament mode's great. You can get your friends over, you put everybody in a tournament, and that itself is a mode, right? Tekken 7 has a tournament mode. I think Street Fighter 5 added a tournament mode. I think all fighting games should have that. It should be online and offline. That's the type of modes I want. That's the type of modes that make these games function. I don't know, maybe have some like Pacific. I know Trials is one thing that people that they have, but I think there needs to be something different. Maybe something more character specific that unlocks costumes. Like, I don't know, maybe having the arcade mode act as the actual story like they used to. And maybe when you beat the arcade mode, if you beat it on hard difficulties, you can unlock different costumes or colors. That's a lot better than spending hours in survival with every character. Maybe add some minigame like Tekken Ball, that was a good minigame. Tekken Force has a little more put into it to make it what it is. I can't really expect every fighting game to have that, but some extra mode would just make my day. And also just having a playable story that's actually good. Mortal Kombat, it gets praised for its single player, but honestly, it's probably also one of the more disappointing ones, specifically Mortal Kombat 11, because you have a story mode, you have the arcade, which is, that's good stuff. But then what do you have after? You have the crypt, which honestly, the crypt could be like one of the best crypts in the series if you didn't have to go and grind out towers over and over again and all your microtransactions and stuff. It's just a mess. I just want fighting games to have everything. I feel you have everything to make your game complete. A lot of developers are making the new games. They're focusing on the fighting, they're focusing on online, and sometimes they add new modes to that. But sometimes the developers don't even have the online right. Like, you're gonna go into a match and you're gonna freaking disconnect or get a bunch of lag, and they don't have the single player or the content of the game right. And keep in mind the content. I don't say single player because it's not just single player content. Because this content, like a tournament mode, will be multiplayer content, right? You could have modes. I don't know, Rival Rush, something you could have in these games that would make it, 10 times better than just, the basic arcade mode with no ending. Soul Calibur is, I know it's all over the place, guys. This is very unscripted, so keep with me. But Soul Calibur has this arcade mode. Soul Calibur has its character creation. Soul Calibur has its different single player modes where you play as a custom character or Weapon Master mode in Soul Calibur 2. Now, the main mode, arcade mode in Soul Calibur, new Soul Calibur, it does not have ending with sub, but it also has a bunch of other content with its Chronicle of Soul. Soul Calibur has so much content that some people actually play Soul Calibur and do not play, like they get it for the single player content because that's how good it is. And I appreciate Soul Calibur for that. And even though it's not the best online, the gameplay still feels fluid. So I think having those extra modes are going to make your game a lot better. And I think that if fighting game developers do focus on this too, as well as the online and the fighting, it can make like those perfect fighting games. a lot of games in the early 2000s had this stuff, and I think the reason why was because though local play was a big thing, online was not as, I guess it was not as important as it is today, because not everybody had their systems online. Everything was integrated online. So really, even though they would put out different versions of the fighting games, they couldn't patch it. The same game. What you sold was what people got, and you had to get that sell in. Now people can just sell stuff with rollback, which is very great. I want games to have good online, but at the same time, I think in the downtime, when I don't want to fight everybody, we should have some other modes that kind of make the game feel a bit more complete, right? I'm fine with a smaller roster. I'm fine with some lighter modes in the game, but just have something more than just the fighting or just the arcade. Have a little bit more. I say even just adding a tournament mode makes stuff a lot better. Hey, look at Dragon Ball Z game. Look at the Dragon Ball Budokai series, Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi series. I spent hours even by myself playing in tournaments against random opponents because it was just fun to do. It was fun to play the World Tournament. Budokai Tenkaichi 3 has a bunch of tournament modes representing different tournaments in the series, and you can choose which one you want to play. So, even though that people consider that Kusoge or just a game that's not, one of the hardcore fighting games, I guess, there's a hardcore community, that game still had a lot of modes. That was released in 2007. Those games were released between like the years of 2002 to 2008. And, that was probably around a time when a lot of fighting games were at their peak, in my opinion. In terms of what they're releasing, hey, Street Fighter 4, still one of my favorite games of all time, right? And it had, its content. It had an arcade, but it had a lot of, story stuff in this arcade. And it had its mode. Tekken 4, Tekken 5, Pacific, Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, even Tekken 6, or Tekken Tag, they all had their modes and stuff, right? You compare it to the fighting games that come out today, it's just not the same. And I wish it was a lot better. I think most important, again, that the fighting itself is the most important thing in the fighting game. Nowadays, online is very important too. Without good online, your fighting game would fail, especially in our current world situation. But I do think that developers should also look into these different modes, into adding these different modes, because there is a community who would get these games just for the single player. When I didn't have people around, I would play those modes and I would enjoy those modes. And I think a lot of people had the same things too. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that I feel as though a lot of fighting games are lacking in that content department. If you go back and look at older fighting games, especially the ones in like the late 90s, 2000s, you realize how much you're kind of missing out on, And I'm not saying that these new fighting games are bad specifically for that. It just feels like something is lacking. And I hope that we can get that fixed, or developers start implementing that stuff very soon. We'll have to see what happens with Guilty Gear Strive's patch. Again, games can be patched nowadays, even releasing rough states, which is still not good to be releasing a rough state. But hey, it can be patched out and stuff. Guilty Gear Strive releasing the good state, so that didn't have that problem. But hopefully, we'll see what they add, and we'll see what other fighting games add in the future. But until then, what do you guys think about this? Am I the only one that really thinks about this when they get a fighting game, considers this? I know a lot of anime fighters like Melty Blood and Under Night have these modes, which is really good. But that's not it's not the mainstream, it's not the majority. And a lot of the big ones just lack these features. So let me know down in the comment sections what you think about this, and if you're a competitive fighting game player, if you're a casual fighting game player, what do you feel about this? I want to say thanks for watching the video, guys. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you like the content on the channel. We got more retro discussion coming, got more videos coming, and I appreciate you guys watching the video. Thanks again. This is the J Blast Network signing out. Don't forget, you gotta believe.